This audiobook reveals the Whispering Codex, 30 timeless parables where silence speaks louder than gold. As you listen, you'll uncover how power flows, not from shouting, but from stillness. The most life-changing secrets aren't announced, they're whispered. The Whispering Codex. Introduction. You stand now at the veiled threshold of the Whispering Codex, a book not etched in ink alone, but woven from the quiet breath between heartbeats. Within its chapters dwell 30 hush parables, of healer and merchant, of scribe and wanderer, each a lantern set along the shadowed trail where unseen truths walk softly. Their paths wind through moonlit bazaars, frost-lit groves, and chambers untouched by time, yet each tale returns to one ancient vow, that silence is the oldest teacher, and those who walk with hushed steps gather treasures no trumpet ever names. Long ago, such teachings would have passed beneath sealed parchment, traded in whispers between those who valued the gold of secrecy over the noise of pride. But now they arrive as breath and echo, asking not to be read, but remembered. Give then the full ear of your spirit, for every tale is a seed that flowers only in stillness. Listen for Michael, whose tongue cost him his fortune, Jessica, whose silence healed what speech could not, Daniel, who waited for the hour truth could be heard, Amanda, whose quiet word turned the hearts of kings, and countless others who came to know that the greatest power is never shouted. Let these stories walk beside you, by candlelight, by campfire, or beneath a starlit sky. Pause often, as one would at a hidden spring, to drink from the cool waters of reflection. And if you dare the meditations within, a coin upon the tongue, the breath held still as mirrored glass, you will learn the sacred art of listening and the deeper mystery of not speaking. Still thy breath now. Let the codex murmur. May its quiet wisdom linger long after the last word fades. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Part 1. The Threshold of Sacred Silence. Chapter 1. The Merchant's Golden Tongue. In the bustling port city of Alexandria, where the scent of cardamom mingled with sea salt, lived a wealthy spice merchant named Michael Rodriguez. His trading vessels were the finest on the Mediterranean, and his network of secret routes brought the rarest spices from distant shores. Michael took great pride in his success, regaling tavern patrons with tales of his cleverly mapped routes and hidden harbors. "None know the spice roads like Rodriguez," he would boast, golden rings glinting as he gestured. "My ships sail paths that others dare not dream of." Each evening, a mute beggar sat in the corner of Michael's favorite tavern, watching silently as the merchant's tongue loosened with wine. The beggar's eyes held an ancient wisdom that Michael was too busy talking to notice. One moonless night, as Michael's ship prepared to depart with its precious cargo, pirates struck from the darkness. They knew exactly where to wait, exactly when to strike. His secret routes, it seemed, had not remained secret. Returning to empty warehouses and mounting debts, Michael found the mute beggar waiting at his door. The beggar pulled out a small writing tablet and scratched these words in the dust. "The sweetest honey draws the most flies, the loudest merchant draws the sharpest knives." He then led Michael to the marketplace where they watched other traders at work. The most successful spoke little, conducted business quietly, and kept their methods to themselves. The ones who boasted loudly of their success often found their fortunes mysteriously diminished. "I understand now," Michael whispered to his silent teacher. "Prosperity grows best in the shade of discretion." The beggar smiled and wrote one final message: "Your tongue is golden, but silence is platinum." From that day forward, Michael Rodriguez became known as the quietest merchant in Alexandria. His new fortune grew far larger than his first, protected by the strength of his silence. Remember this, dear seeker: your success contains the seeds of its own destruction when proclaimed too proudly. The universe conspires to humble loose tongues and rewards those who guard their wisdom. Practice this ancient merchant's meditation. Sit comfortably and place a small coin on your tongue. Feel its weight, its metallic taste. For 5 minutes, let this physical reminder help you hold perfect silence. Notice the thoughts that tempt you to speak, to prove, to boast. Let them pass like ships on the horizon. With daily practice, you will develop the discipline of the prosperous, knowing when to speak, when to whisper, and when silence is worth more than gold. For as Michael Rodriguez learned at great cost, fortune favors not only the bold, but more so the discreet. Chapter 2: The Healer's Burden. In a misty valley where ancient pines whispered their secrets, lived a gifted healer named Jessica Thompson. Her small cottage, filled with drying herbs and sacred crystals, drew a steady stream of villagers seeking cures for their ailments. But healing came with an unexpected weight. As Jessica treated her patients, they shared not just their physical pains, but their deepest secrets: forbidden loves, hidden shames, desperate fears. Soon her mind became a vessel overflowing with others' stories, and she found herself unable to sleep, haunted by the weight of carrying so many untold tales. Perhaps sharing these burdens would lighten my load, she thought, considering confiding in the village priestess. But before she could act, an ancient woman appeared at her door one moonlit night. The elder's silver hair seemed to glow with its own light as she said, "I sense you drowning in others' waters, young healer." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "How can I hold so many secrets without breaking?" The elder led her to a nearby sacred pool, its surface mirror-smooth in the darkness. She dropped a single pebble, and they watched the ripples disturb the perfect reflection of the stars. "See how one small disturbance shatters the sky's reflection?" the elder asked. "So too does loose talk disturb the delicate surface of healing. But watch." They waited in silence as the ripples gradually stilled until the pool once again perfectly reflected the heavens above. The power of healing lies not in stirring waters, but in becoming still enough to reflect truth, the elder taught. When people share their secrets, they seek not an echo, but a sacred space that can hold their truth without rippling. Jessica understood. Her role was not to carry stories or spread them, but to be like the pool, still, deep, and able to hold everything while reflecting only light. From that day forward, Jessica Thompson became known as the Silent Healer. People said her presence itself became medicine, her quiet understanding more potent than any herb. The secrets shared in her cottage dissolved like morning mist, leaving only healing in their wake. Remember this, truth seeker: the highest service is not in speaking wisdom, but in becoming a vessel pure enough to hold it. Practice this sacred silence, find a quiet place, and imagine yourself as a still pool. As thoughts and stories arise, neither cling to them nor push them away. Simply observe how they settle on their own when not disturbed by judgment or reaction. Practice this daily, and you will develop the healer's gift, the ability to hold space so pure that truth can reflect itself. For as Jessica Thompson discovered, in perfect stillness, healing happens by itself. Chapter 3, The Scribe's Dilemma. In the gilded halls of ancient Persepolis, where whispers echoed through marble corridors like restless spirits, served a court scribe named Daniel Sullivan. His reed pen captured every proclamation, every judgment, and every secret that passed through the royal chambers. Daniel's gift went beyond mere transcription. His keen eye noticed patterns others missed. In his private scrolls, he documented the subtle signs of corruption, how the winemaster's hands trembled when serving certain nobles, which advisors avoided each other's gaze, whose servants carried messages in the dead of night. One evening, while recording the day's observations by lamplight, Daniel's hands froze mid-sentence. His documented patterns had revealed something terrible, evidence that the king's most trusted advisor was slowly poisoning him with exotic herbs slipped into his nightly tea. The weight of this knowledge bent Daniel's shoulders like Atlas bearing the world. To speak meant death for revealing the advisor's treachery. To remain silent meant death for the king. Truth and power stood opposed, with his conscience caught between them. That night, a mysterious figure appeared in his chambers, an ancient record-keeper who had served 3 dynasties before vanishing into legend. His eyes held the wisdom of centuries as he studied Daniel's scrolls. "You see clearly," the elder said, "but wisdom lies not in seeing alone. It lies in knowing when truth serves life and when it serves death." He led Daniel to the palace archives, where countless scrolls gathered dust. "Look here," he said, pulling out 3 ancient records. "These scribes also saw truth. One spoke too soon and caused a war. Another spoke too late and allowed a massacre. The third," he smiled, "spoke at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right person, in exactly the right way." The elder traced his finger through the dust, writing, "Truth without timing is like an arrow without aim. Both can kill the wrong target." Daniel understood. The next day he arranged for the king's food taster to accidentally discover the poison plot while the royal guard was present. The advisor was arrested, the king lived, and Daniel's name appeared nowhere in the official record. Remember this, seeker of truth. Knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom knows not just what to say, but when to say it, how to say it, and sometimes whether to say it at all. Practice this discernment ritual. Each evening, write down 3 truths you observe that day. For each one, ask yourself, whose life does this truth serve? What timing would serve it best? What form should it take? Then burn the paper, letting the ashes teach you that some truths are meant to dissolve back into mystery. For as Daniel Sullivan learned, the wisest scribe knows when to let his pen rest silent upon the page. Chapter 4, The Oracle's Paradox. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of Mount Parnassus, where ancient stones whispered prophecies to those who knew how to listen, served a young oracle named Amanda Garcia. Unlike her predecessors, who delivered thunderous proclamations from the sacred tripod, Amanda's prophecies came as soft as falling snow. The temple elders worried about her gentle approach. "An oracle must command attention," they insisted. "How will kings and generals heed prophecies they can barely hear?" Amanda struggled to match their expectations, forcing her voice to boom across the temple chambers. But the more forcefully she spoke, the more her visions became clouded, like stars obscured by storm clouds. One night, as she knelt in frustrated meditation, an ethereal figure materialized from the sacred vapors, the spirit of the very first Pythia, her silver hair floating as if underwater. "Child," the ancient oracle whispered, "why do you shout at those who seek truth?" "The elders say I must speak with authority," Amanda replied. The spirit gestured to the temple's eternal flame. "Watch," she breathed. The flame danced, casting shadows that spoke more eloquently than words. Does fire need to roar to prove its power? Does wisdom need to shout to prove its worth? She guided Amanda to the sacred spring where the prophetic vapors rose. True prophecy comes not from the mouth, but from the space between breaths. The gods whisper because mortals are deaf to thunder. The Spirit taught Amanda to enter the silence between thoughts, where divine wisdom flowed like underground streams. Let your words rise like incense, subtle, yet penetrating deeper than any shout. From that day forward, Amanda Garcia became known as the Whispering Oracle. Those seeking wisdom had to lean in close, their own minds growing quiet to hear her soft pronouncements. And in that shared silence, her prophecies proved more accurate than any before. Kings learned to leave their guards outside and kneel beside her to hear truth's gentle voice. Generals set aside their weapons, finding more power in her whispered guidance than in battle cries. Remember this, seeker, divine wisdom needs no volume to prove its worth. The quieter you become, the more the universe speaks through you. Practice this oracle silence and sit before a candle flame. As the flame flickers, quiet your thoughts until you can hear its silent song. Practice until you can distinguish between your voice and the voice of wisdom that whispers beneath your thoughts. For as Amanda Garcia discovered, the deepest truths come not as thunder from above, but as ripples in the still pond of silence. Chapter 5: The Fisherman's Net. Along the misty shores of an ancient lake where water-worn stones held memories of countless tides, lived a humble fisherman named Joshua Walker. Unlike the other fishermen who sought their catch in the bustling daylight hours, Joshua preferred the quiet darkness before dawn, when the water's surface mirrored the stars above. One such morning, as his small boat drifted silently through the pre-dawn fog, Joshua heard voices carrying across the water. Hidden by the mist, he observed two nobles in a nearby vessel, speaking of their plot to poison the city's water supply and blame the neighboring kingdom to incite war. The knowledge settled in his gut like a stone. Every face he saw in the marketplace now carried new weight. These were the people whose lives hung in the balance of what he had heard. The secret filled his nets alongside the fish, growing heavier with each passing day. Unable to sleep, Joshua sought counsel from Old Way, a mysterious figure who lived in a cave by the shore and was said to have once been the emperor's master of spies. The ancient man sat surrounded by odd containers, some sealed with a wax, others with intricate locks, and some appearing completely ordinary. "See these vessels," Old Way said, lifting a simple clay jar. "Each holds different waters. Some are pure mountain springs, others deadly poison, yet they look the same from outside." He placed the jar back among its identical twins. "Knowledge is like water, young fisherman. It can sustain life or bring death. The vessel that holds it determines its power." Joshua watched as Old Way poured water between containers of different shapes. Some vessels trap and stagnate, others purify. The wisest vessel, he demonstrated with a specially crafted bowl, releases its contents only when and where it should flow. Understanding dawned like the sun through morning mist. Joshua arranged for a trusted palace guard to be fishing nearby when the nobles met again to discuss their plot. The conspiracy was uncovered, but Joshua's name never appeared in any record of the event. Remember this, seeker. Not all nets are meant for fish. Sometimes we catch knowledge that must be handled with the same care as we would handle water in the desert, precious yet dangerous if misused. Practice this water-gazing meditation. Find a still pool of water at dawn or dusk. Watch how it reflects both light and shadow without preference. Notice how it holds all images, yet remains unchanged by them. Learn from the water how to hold knowledge, reflecting what needs to be seen while remaining pure and undisturbed in your depths. For as Joshua Walker discovered, the wise fisherman knows that some catches must be released back into the mystery from which they came. Chapter 6, The Blacksmith's Forge. In the shadow of an ancient volcano, where Earth's molten heart still whispered through steam vents and heated springs, worked a master blacksmith named Sarah Mitchell. Her forge was said to burn hotter than any other, though few noticed it was not the flames alone that gave her steel its legendary strength. Sarah understood metal's secret language, how it sang different notes at varying temperatures, how it whispered its readiness to be shaped, but more importantly, she knew when to keep silent about the mysteries her forge revealed. Her apprentice, young Thomas Hayes, lacked such discretion. While delivering swords to the noble houses, he enjoyed sharing gossip he overheard at Sarah's forge, which lords commissioned weapons in secret, which ladies requested unusual items, what the metal revealed about their true intentions. One evening, as Sarah quenched a blade in darkness, the metal's song turned discordant. Through the steam rose a figure she knew from childhood tales, the Forge Mother, first teacher of metalwork to humanity. Her hair flickered like copper wire. Her skin glowed like heated iron. "Your apprentice speaks too freely of forged secrets," the spirit warned, her voice resonating like struck steel. "Metal remembers what it witnesses. When its memories are carelessly spoken, they burn those who revealed them. One could down." The next day, Thomas boasted to a merchant about a noble lord's secret commission for assassination daggers. By nightfall, dark figures sought the apprentice, hoping to silence the source of dangerous knowledge. Sarah found him trembling in the coal shed. Leading him to the forge, she lifted a glowing iron bar. "Watch," she commanded, dipping it into water. Steam exploded upward with a furious hiss. "Secrets are like hot iron," she taught. "Handle them properly. They become tools of power. Handle them carelessly." The steam scalded a nearby cloth, leaving scorch marks. They burn not just you, but all they touch. Remember this, seeker. Knowledge from sacred spaces carries obligations. Like molten metal, it must be cooled and shaped with wisdom, or it becomes a danger to wielder and witness alike. Practice this fire-breathing ritual and sit before a candle flame. Breathe in slowly, imagining gathering light. Hold the breath, feeling it forge wisdom within. Release it gradually, watching the flame respond. Let each breath teach you the difference between power held and power released. For as Sarah Mitchell learned, the greatest force lies not in the heat of revelation, but in knowing when to let truth cool in silence's embrace. Chapter 7, The Shepherd's Wisdom. In the ancient highlands where mist-shrouded stones held memories of forgotten rituals, A young shepherd named Timothy Allen discovered he possessed an unusual gift. While other shepherds guided their flocks with whistles and shouts, Timothy could hear the subtle language of the animals themselves, not just his sheep, but the wild creatures that watched from forest shadows. At first he delighted in this ability, spending hours listening to ravens debate philosophy and foxes share tales of their hunts. But as his gift grew stronger, he began hearing deeper secrets. Wolves planning their movements, eagles mapping hidden valleys, deer revealing paths to sacred springs that no human had ever seen. The weight of these revelations became heavy on his young shoulders. Should he warn the village when wolves spoke of hunger? Should he guide hunters to the paths animals trusted him with? One twilight, while following a particularly chatty lamb, Timothy stumbled upon an ancient circle of standing stones. There, tending a small fire, sat an aged druid named Elizabeth Hayes, her silver hair crowned with oak leaves. "You bear the burden of nature's tongue," she said, without looking up. "It's been 3 centuries since I last met another who could hear the true speech of beasts." Timothy sat beside her fire. "The animals share so many secrets," he confessed. "I don't know which to keep and which to tell." Elizabeth tossed herbs into the flames, releasing sweet smoke. "Watch," she whispered. A deer emerged from the forest, approaching the fire without fear. It dipped its head to Elizabeth, sharing something in that secret language. "Nature's wisdom flows like an underground river," she taught. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried, nourishing life from below. Others must spring to the surface when needed. True wisdom lies in knowing the difference." She taught Timothy to listen not just with his ears but with his heart, to feel which secrets were his to keep and which were meant to flow through him to others. "You are not meant to be a vessel that holds," she explained, "but a hollow reed through which nature's song can play when needed. Remember this, seeker. The deepest truths of nature are not meant for human ears alone. Some secrets must remain wild and free, speaking only to those who have learned to listen without seeking to possess." Practice this animal listening meditation. Sit in nature until the wild things forget your presence. Don't try to understand their language. Simply let their sounds wash over you like rain. Notice how wisdom comes, not from grasping at meaning, but from allowing yourself to become part of nature's quiet chorus. For as Timothy Allen discovered, the greatest honor is not in knowing nature's secrets, but in being trusted to keep them. Chapter 8, The Weaver's Pattern. In a mountain village where mists wove between ancient pines like threads of silk, lived a weaver named Stephanie Martinez. Her loom sat before a window facing east, where first light transformed ordinary threads into strands of liquid gold. Unlike other weavers who followed traditional patterns, Stephanie's hands moved as if guided by unseen forces, creating designs that seemed to shift and breathe in lamplight. One morning, as her shuttle danced between wool threads, Stephanie noticed something extraordinary. The pattern taking shape matched exactly the path of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. By sunset, the storm had followed every whirl and spiral her loom had predicted. Soon she began seeing other prophetic images emerge: the flight paths of migrating birds, the branching patterns of spring floods, even the invisible currents of fate that guided travelers to her village. The weight of these visions troubled her. Each new pattern revealed more: political intrigues in distant courts, approaching armies, secrets that could topple kingdoms. Her fingers trembled at the loom, knowing each design she wove might change the course of lives. While gathering dye herbs at dawn, she encountered a mysterious monk named Benjamin Hayes, sitting beside a spider's web jeweled with dew. "Your threads speak too loudly," he said, gesturing to her rough hands. "Come, watch how our 8-legged sister weaves." Together they observed the spider spinning in silence. "See how she creates between the spaces," Benjamin taught. "The web's power lies not in the silk itself, but in the sacred geometry of emptiness between threads." The monk revealed he belonged to an ancient order of pattern keepers. "Some designs are meant to remain unbound by thread," he explained. "They must dance freely in the realm of possibility, like sunlight on water. True mastery lies not in capturing every vision, but in knowing which patterns to weave and which to let float away, like morning mist." Remember this, seeker, not all patterns that reveal themselves must be made manifest. Some designs serve best when left in the loom of imagination, where they can seed infinite possibilities rather than single certainties. Practice this thread meditation. Hold a single thread before you in silence. Notice how it casts a shadow, creating patterns with what is not there. Let your awareness weave between substance and space, between what is shown and what is suggested. Learn to read the wisdom hidden in the gaps between things. For as Stephanie Martinez discovered, the most powerful patterns are those we choose to leave unwoven, held sacred in the silence of potential. Chapter 9, The Gardener's Seeds. In the Emperor's sacred gardens, where each flower held memories of 1,000 springs, worked a gardener named Matthew Parker. Unlike the other imperial gardeners who shouted commands to their apprentices across the grounds, Matthew tended his plots in near-perfect silence, his lips moving in whispers that only the plants could hear. The other gardeners mocked his gentle ways, boasting of their own methods for forcing growth through aggressive pruning and loud proclamations of technique. Yet Matthew's sections of the garden flourished beyond explanation. Roses bloomed out of season, fruit trees bore impossible bounties, and healing herbs grew with potency that amazed the court physicians. One misty morning, while sharing secrets with a struggling seedling, Matthew noticed an ancient woman collecting dew in a jade bowl. Her silver hair was threaded with living vines, and butterflies rested upon her shoulders as if they were family. "You've discovered the first language," she said, her voice like rustling leaves. "I am Catherine Hayes, keeper of the original garden, where all growing things remember when humans spoke their tongue." She dipped her fingers in the dew, touching them to Matthew's lips. Suddenly, he could hear the plants with perfect clarity, not just their needs and natures, but the ancient wisdom they had gathered through millennia of silent observation. "The plants remember every word ever spoken in anger or love," Catherine taught. "They drink in our intentions like sunlight. Shouts are like harsh storms that make them curl inward. Whispers are like gentle rain that invites them to grow." She showed him how different plants responded to various tones, how roses opened to poetry, how herbs grew stronger when thanked, how trees reached toward songs of praise. But their deepest wisdom, she revealed, comes only in silence, when we learn to listen rather than speak. Remember this, seeker. The natural world holds libraries of knowledge in its leaves and roots, But this wisdom reveals itself only to those who approach with reverence rather than demand. Practice this plant whispering ritual. Sit before a growing thing until your heartbeat matches its subtle swaying. When your breath becomes as soft as morning dew, whisper your deepest truth to its leaves. Notice how it responds not to your words, but to the intention carrying them. Learn to speak the language of gentle growth, for as Matthew Parker discovered, the most powerful gardening happens not through commanding nature's force, but through becoming quiet enough to join its ancient dance. Chapter 10, The Scholar's Library. And the candlelit depths of an ancient library carved into living stone, where scrolls held breath older than empires, worked a devoted scholar named Nicole Adams. Unlike other academics who hoarded knowledge like misers clutching coins, Nicole approached each text with reverence, understanding that some wisdom demanded silence to reveal its depths. One night, while organizing a collection of mysterious texts that seemed to hum with their own inner light, she discovered a blank book bound in opalescent leather. As she touched its cover, golden script began flowing across its chapters, not written by any earthly hand, but emerging from the paper itself, like dawn spreading across the sky. To her amazement, the book wrote itself differently for each person who opened it. For those who boasted of seeking knowledge, its chapters remained stubbornly blank. But for those who approached with quiet wisdom, it revealed secrets that made the stars themselves lean closer to listen. While contemplating this mystery, Nicole encountered a peculiar librarian named Raymond Hayes, whose robe seemed woven from shadows and lamplight. "You've found the codex of unspoken truths," he whispered, his voice carrying the dust of centuries. "It writes only what must remain sacred." "But how can knowledge serve if kept secret?" Nicole asked, watching golden letters dance across the page. Raymond gestured to the vast library around them. "Some truths are like delicate flowers that bloom only in darkness," he explained. "Expose them too quickly to harsh light, and they wither before their essence can be understood." He showed her how certain scrolls change their text when read aloud, how some volumes could only be understood in perfect silence, how the deepest mysteries wrote themselves in invisible ink upon the reader's heart rather than the page. True wisdom, Raymond taught, knows when to speak and when to hold sacred silence. Some knowledge must be protected not from others, but for others, kept safe until the proper moment of revelation. Remember this, seeker, not all that is learned must be taught. Some discoveries are seeds that must be held in the dark earth of silence before they can grow into understanding. Practice this guardian meditation. Hold a cherished truth in your heart without speaking it aloud. Feel how it grows stronger in the soil of silence. Notice how wisdom deepens when held sacred rather than scattered like seeds on stony ground. For as Nicole Adams discovered, the greatest libraries are not those filled with countless books, but those that preserve the precious silences between what is known and what must remain mysterious. Part 2, Parables for the Quiet Soul. Chapter 11, The Mapmaker's Territory. In a mist-shrouded valley where ancient trade routes crossed like whispers in the night, lived a cartographer named Robert Chen. Unlike other mapmakers who prided themselves on detailed renderings of every mountain and stream, Robert was known for the maps he refused to draw. His workshop contained no ordinary maps, but rather curious documents covered in cryptic symbols, spiraling patterns that seemed to chart the movement of dreams, delicate lines that trace the paths of autumn winds, and strange markers noting places where the veil between worlds grew thin. One evening, as Robert contemplated how to map an impossible crossroads where time itself seemed to fold, a hooded figure appeared at his door. "I am Anthony Hayes of the Invisible Guild," the stranger whispered him. "Those who guard the territories too sacred for parchment." The visitor produced a blank scroll that shimmered like moonlight on water. As Robert watched, landscapes appeared and disappeared on its surface. Hidden valleys that existed between heartbeats, mountain passes that open only during eclipses, and forests that walked under starlight. "Some territories resist being captured," Anthony taught, unrolling another scroll that seemed to contain moving shadows. "The moment you fix them with ink, they shift like sand in an hourglass. The truest maps are those we carry in our bones." He showed Robert how certain landscapes could only be navigated by forgetting everything about them, how some destinations existed solely in the space between thoughts, and how the most precious routes revealed themselves only to those wise enough not to mark them. "Your greatest service," Anthony explained, "is not in showing others where to go, but in helping them understand which paths must remain unmapped. For in this world of endless charting and measuring, some territories must remain wild and free. Remember this, seeker. Not all paths that can be walked should be marked. Some journeys are meant to be discovered anew by each traveler, their way lit only by the compass of the heart. Practice this cartographer's meditation. Close your eyes and imagine a blank map of your inner landscape. Instead of drawing borders, feel the territories that exist between definition. Notice how wisdom flows most freely through the spaces you leave unmarked. For as Robert Chen discovered, the most valuable maps are those we keep undrawn, preserving the sacred mysteries that guide us home to ourselves. Chapter 12, The Musician's Silent Song. In the celestial court of the Jade Emperor, where heavenly maidens danced on moonbeams and immortals played instruments carved from sacred jade, served a gifted musician named Ashley Rodriguez. Unlike other court musicians who competed to fill the air with elaborate melodies, Ashley was known for the songs she never played. Her most powerful compositions remained locked within her heart, written in a mysterious notation that disappeared if anyone but her tried to read it. While others performed grandly for earthly acclaim, she would sit motionless, with her guqin, fingers hovering above the strings, playing symphonies that only spirits could hear. One night, as Ashley contemplated a melody too profound to give voice, a mysterious figure emerged from the shadows between sound waves. "I am Helen Hayes, guardian of the unsung," she said, her voice resonating like crystal bowls. "You've discovered that the most powerful music exists in the space between notes." Helen produced an instrument made of living light, its strings woven from starlight and silence. When she moved her hands above it without touching the strings, Ashley heard music that made her soul weep, compositions that could never exist in physical sound. "The greatest musicians," Helen taught, "are those who understand that some songs are too sacred for human ears. They exist only in the realm of pure potential, where music and silence dance as one." She showed Ashley how certain melodies could heal wounds if left unplayed, how some harmonies maintained the balance of nature only when held in the heart, and how the most transformative symphonies were those that remained forever potential, never manifested. "Your gift," Helen revealed, "is not in the music you perform, but in the songs you protect from manifestation. For in this world of endless noise, some melodies must remain in the sacred silence of possibility. Remember this, seeker. Not all music is meant to be heard with mortal ears. The most powerful songs are those that play in the sacred chamber of the heart, where silence and sound are one. Practice this silent symphony. Sit in perfect stillness and feel the music that lives in your bones. Let it rise within you like a tide, but do not give it voice. Notice how it grows more powerful in the keeping, how it transforms you without ever breaking the silence. For as Ashley Rodriguez discovered, the most profound music is not played upon instruments of wood and string, but upon the invisible instruments of spirit and silence. Chapter 13, The Dancer's Hidden Steps. In the shadow of an ancient temple, where sacred flames never ceased burning, lived a dancer named Jennifer Lopez. Unlike the performers who dazzled crowds in the marketplace, Jennifer practiced in secret before dawn, when even the morning stars held their breath to watch. She had learned the sacred movements from her grandmother, Isabella Martinez, whose dancing was said to heal the sick and make barren fields bloom. The most powerful dances, her grandmother taught, are those performed when no one is watching. One morning, as Jennifer practiced a sequence that made the air shimmer like heat waves, her grandmother appeared wearing robes that seemed woven from moonlight and shadow. "Today," Isabella whispered, "I will teach you the steps of the invisible path." She demonstrated movements that seemed to bend reality itself, gestures that could only be seen from the corner of the eye, turns that moved through spaces between moments, and leaps that crossed the boundaries between worlds. Most dancers perform for others, Isabella explained, executing a spiral that left traces of light in the air. But the true sacred dancer performs for the eyes of eternity. Some movements are so powerful, they must remain hidden, like seeds buried in dark soil. She showed Jennifer how certain sequences could mend torn spirits if danced in solitude, how some rhythms maintained the heartbeat of the earth when performed in darkness, and how the most transformative dances were those that left no trace in the physical world. Your gift, Isabella revealed, is not in what you show to others, but in the dances you keep sacred. For in this world of endless performance, some movements must remain in the realm of mystery. Through the years, Jennifer mastered dances that could never be seen by mortal eyes. Choreographies that existed only in the space between breaths. Movements that spoke directly to the soul, without disturbing the air. Remember this, seeker, not all sacred movements are meant for human eyes. The most powerful dances are those performed in the temple of the heart, where motion and stillness become one. Practice this invisible dance and stand in perfect stillness and feel the dance that lives within your bones. Let it move through you like wind through leaves, but keep your body motionless. Notice how the most profound movements happen in absolute stillness. For as Jennifer Lopez discovered, the truest dance is not performed with the body alone, but with the invisible essence that animates all creation, a choreography of spirit that leaves no footprints on the earth. Before we get into the next chapter, you can download a free ebook version of this audiobook using the link in the pinned comment below this video. Chapter 14, The Potter's Vessel. In a mountain valley where morning mists clung to ancient stones like memories, lived a potter named David Kim. Unlike other craftsmen who measured their worth in quantities of bowls and jars, David was known for creating vessels that held what could not be seen. His humble workshop contained rows of seemingly empty containers that hummed with invisible presence. Some held captured moonlight, others the whispers of spring winds, and still others the dreams of sleeping butterflies. One evening, as David's hands moved across wet clay in the fading light, an elderly woman appeared like a shadow taking form. "I am Catherine Ward," she said, her voice soft as settling ash, "keeper of the vessels of the void." She produced a plain clay bowl that seemed to draw light into itself. As David watched, the simple vessel began to pulse with hidden rhythms, like a heart beating beneath the earth. The truest containers, Catherine taught, are shaped not by hands alone, but by the silence between thoughts. She showed him how to create vessels that could hold a mother's love, cups that brimmed with unspoken prayers, and urns that preserved the exact moment when night transforms to dawn. "Your fingers must learn to listen," she whispered, guiding his hands, "for clay remembers every intention it touches." David discovered that working in complete silence allowed him to shape containers that defied physical laws. Bowls larger on the inside than outside, vases that held entire forests in their depths, and tiny cups that could pour endless streams of wisdom. "Your greatest work," Catherine revealed, "is not in what your vessels contain, but in the sacred space they create for possibility. For in this world of endless filling and emptying, some containers must remain vessels of pure potential. Remember this, seeker, not all treasures can be held in ordinary cups. The most precious vessels are those that make space for the ineffable, their emptiness more valuable than gold." Practice this potter's meditation. Cup your hands before you like an empty bowl. Feel the space between them become a sacred vessel. Notice how this hollow becomes fuller the less you try to fill it, how it deepens with each breath of acceptance. For as David Kim discovered, the most powerful containers are not shaped from clay alone, but from the mysterious substance of silence itself, holding space for miracles yet to be born. Chapter 15, The Hunter's Invisible Prey. In the misty valleys where shadow and sunlight danced through ancient pines, there lived a huntress named Melissa Turner. Unlike other hunters who tracked deer and boar, Melissa pursued quarry that could only be glimpsed when the mind became as still as mountain stone. She had heard tales of the ghost stag, a creature white as morning frost, whose hooves never touched the earth, and whose antlers held the wisdom of 1,000 moons. Many hunters had tried to track it with arrows and spears, but Melissa knew better. She had learned to hunt with silence itself. One dawn, as she sat motionless beneath an elder oak, a figure emerged from the forest shadows like dew taking form. "I am Raymond Hayes, keeper of the invisible trail," he said, his voice barely a whisper above the wind. "You seek what cannot be caught by conventional means." He showed her tracks that appeared only when you weren't looking directly at them, signs that vanished if you tried to study them too closely. The ghost stag, Raymond taught, is not merely a beast, but wisdom itself. It can only be approached by those who learn to stalk their own thoughts. He demonstrated how to move so quietly that even thoughts couldn't hear you coming, how to breathe so softly that reality itself didn't notice your presence. Most hunters, he explained, fail because they seek to grasp. But the greatest prey can only be reached by those who learn to empty their hands. Melissa discovered that the closer she came to perfect stillness, the more the forest revealed its secrets. She learned to read stories in falling leaves, to hear prophecies in bird calls, and to see pathways that existed between moments of time. Your true quarry, Raymond revealed, is not the stag itself, but the silence from which it emerges. For in this world of endless pursuit, some treasures can only be found by those who learn to stop chasing. Remember this, seeker: the most valuable prey cannot be captured with weapons or nets. The greatest hunt leads not to triumph over a quarry, but to surrender before mystery. Practice this hunter's stillness. Find a quiet space and become absolutely motionless. Let your breath grow so subtle it disappears. Notice how the more still you become, the more the invisible world reveals itself to you. For as Melissa Turner discovered, the truest hunting happens not in forests of wood and leaf, but in the boundless wilderness of consciousness, where silence itself becomes both hunter and prey. Chapter 16, The Baker's Secret Recipe. In a village where dawn arrived first in all the kingdom, there lived a baker named Brian McCarthy. Unlike other bakers who measured their worth in coins and praise, Brian created loaves that nourished more than just the body. His small bakery between ancient olive trees filled the morning air with aromas that made weary travelers weep with remembered joy. One night, as the moon hung full as a rising loaf, an elderly woman appeared at his door. Her clothes were dusted with flour that seemed to glow. "I am Eleanor Foster," she said, her voice warm as fresh bread. "Guardian of the Sacred Hearth." She produced a small cloth-wrapped bundle that hummed with hidden power. Inside was a recipe written on parchment that seemed to shift under Brian's gaze. "This bread," Eleanor explained, "feeds the invisible hunger that all souls carry." The recipe called for ingredients Brian had never imagined: a cup of morning silence, 3 measures of moonlight filtered through olive leaves, the sound of birds taking flight, and hope kneaded into every fold. True nourishment, Eleanor taught, comes not from what we put into the dough, but from the sacred intention we hold while baking. She showed him how to work the dough with such presence that each loaf contained healing for specific ailments: bread that could mend broken hearts, rolls that restored lost courage, and small sweet cakes that helped children remember their dreams. "The secret," Eleanor whispered as she shaped a loaf with hands that left trails of starlight, "is that you must bake as if feeding the divine itself. Each loaf should be created in such perfect silence that you can hear the wheat remembering its time in the field." Brian learned to bake in the depths of night when the village slept and even the crickets held their song. His bread began to carry messages of comfort that could never be spoken in words, wisdom that could only be tasted, and blessings that melted on the tongue like morning dew. Remember this, seeker: the most powerful nourishment cannot be measured in common scales. True sustenance comes from what we weave into our offerings through silent intention. Practice this sacred baking meditation. Cup your hands as if holding bread dough. Feel the warmth of potential flowing between your palms. With each breath, infuse this invisible substance with pure intention, knowing that all creation begins in such quiet moments of preparation. For as Brian McCarthy discovered, the most transformative food is cooked not in ordinary ovens, but in the sacred hearth of the heart, where everyday ingredients become vessels for divine nourishment. Chapter 17, The Jeweler's Hidden Gem. In a city where light danced differently through the air, lived a jeweler named Rachel Stevens. Unlike other craftsmen who worked with ordinary gems, Rachel could see the spaces between sparkles, the moments where light hesitated before choosing which way to shine. Her workshop, tucked beneath the royal palace's eastern tower, contained countless velvet-lined boxes that appeared empty to common eyes. Yet those with the right kind of vision could see them filled with stones that existed between possibility and form. One twilight, as Rachel sorted what appeared to be ordinary pebbles, an ancient woman materialized like mist condensing into dewdrops. "I am Helen Brooks," she said, her voice crystalline and clear, "speaker to the stone-born." From her robes, Helen drew forth what seemed to be a simple river rock. But as Rachel watched, the stone began to pulse within her fire, revealing layers of reality folded within its depths. True gems, Helen taught, hide their hearts from those who would name them too quickly. She showed Rachel how certain stones could only be seen through peripheral vision, how others revealed themselves only to those who had kept a secret for 7 years, and how the rarest gems became visible only in the presence of absolute trust. "Watch," Helen whispered, breathing on a dull pebble. Under her breath, it transformed into a cascade of colors that existed outside any known spectrum. Some treasures can only be worked by hands that have learned to hold mystery. Rachel discovered that in perfect silence she could hear crystals singing their true names, could see the threads of light that connected them to stars, yet unborn, and could shape gems that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. "Your greatest work," Helen revealed, "lies not in what you make visible, but in what you help others discover within themselves. For in this world of endless glitter, some jewels must remain hidden to maintain their power. Remember this, seeker. Not all treasures shine for every eye. The most precious gems are those that reveal themselves only to those who have learned to look with the heart's silent gaze." Practice this jeweler's meditation. Hold a simple stone in your palm. Close your eyes and feel how it grows warmer, lighter, more alive. Notice how it begins to pulse with possibility when you stop trying to define what it is. For as Rachel Stevens discovered, the truest gems are not found in mines or markets, but in the sacred space between seeing and knowing, where silence itself crystallizes into wonder. Chapter 18. The Sailor's Uncharted Waters. In the age when stars still whispered their secrets to those who knew how to listen, there lived a navigator named Kevin O'Brien. Unlike other sailors who charted courses by common stars, Kevin could read the spaces between the winds, where ancient currents carried whispers of islands that appeared on no mortal maps. His vessel, the Twilight Whisper, was said to move like thought itself across the waves. Those who sailed with him noticed how he would stand perfectly still at the helm, head tilted as if listening to voices in the breeze that others couldn't hear. One night, as phosphorescent waves painted the sea with living light, a figure emerged from the ocean mists, walking across the water as if it were solid ground. "I am Catherine Ward," she said, her voice flowing like liquid moonlight. "Keeper of the hidden harbors." She drew patterns in the air with her finger, leaving trails of ghostly light that revealed the secret language of wind and wave. "True navigation," Catherine taught, "requires learning to read what cannot be written in any chart." She showed Kevin how certain winds carried memories of lost civilizations, how others sang of shores that existed between dreams and waking, and how the rarest breezes could guide a worthy vessel to ports that manifested only during the pause between one breath and the next. "Watch," Catherine whispered, touching the surface of the sea. the water stilled into a mirror that reflected not the sky above, but landscapes from other realms. Some destinations can only be reached by those who learn to sail on silence itself. Kevin discovered that in perfect stillness, he could feel the pulse of ancient tides, could read stories written in sea foam, and could navigate through corridors of possibility that existed in the spaces where map edges blurred. Your true journey, Catherine revealed, lies not in reaching hidden shores, but in becoming the still point around which all waters turn. For in this ocean of endless movement, some harbors appear only to those who have learned to anchor themselves in mystery. Remember this, seeker, not all voyages follow charted routes. The most precious destinations are those that can only be found by those who have learned to navigate by the compass of the heart. Practice this sailor's stillness. Stand facing any breeze, however slight. Close your eyes and feel how the wind carries messages when you cease trying to translate them into words. Notice how it reveals directions that exist beyond mere north and south. For as Kevin O'Brien discovered, the truest journeys happen not on any physical sea, but on the sacred waters of consciousness, where silence itself becomes both vessel and shore. Chapter 19. The Storyteller's Untold Tale. In the days when words still held their first magic, there lived a storyteller named Amy Phillips. Unlike other tale weavers who spoke of kings and battles, Amy knew a story so powerful it could reshape the fabric of reality itself. A story that had chosen her as its keeper. Her small cottage sat at the crossroads where twilight lingered longest, its walls lined with scrolls that appeared blank to all eyes but hers. Those who visited spoke of hearing whispers from empty corners as if untold stories rustled their chapters in the dark. One evening, as shadows danced like puppet plays on her walls, a figure stepped through her doorway, trailing threads of starlight. "I am Ruth Henderson," she said, her voice echoing with 1,000 unspoken tales. "Guardian of the stories that must never be told." From her sleeve, Ruth drew forth what appeared to be an empty book bound in night-black leather. But as Amy watched, golden letters swirled across its surface, forming and dissolving like dreams at dawn. "Some stories," Ruth taught her, "are too powerful to be spoken aloud. They must instead be lived within the heart." She showed Amy how certain tales could alter the course of rivers if whispered near water, how others could wake ancient powers if told under full moons, and how the most potent stories could reshape kingdoms if released at precisely the wrong moment. "Observe," Ruth whispered, opening the empty book. Above its chapters, scenes played out in mist, possibilities that would solidify into reality if given voice. The most powerful stories are those we choose to keep in the realm of pure potential. Amy learned to recognize tales that hummed with destiny, to feel the weight of narratives that could topple thrones or raise new ones, and to cradle stories that existed in multiple versions simultaneously, each waiting for the right moment to become real. Your greatest gift, Ruth revealed, lies not in the stories you tell, but in those you protect from premature telling. For in this world of endless chatter, some tales must remain unspoken to preserve their power. Remember this, seeker, not every story yearns to be told. The most transformative tales are those that ripen in silence, changing both keeper and world through their potential alone. Practice this tale-keeper's meditation. Hold an unspoken story in your heart. Any simple tale will do. Feel how it grows more potent when given the space to exist as pure possibility. Notice how it transforms you through its contained power. For as Amy Phillips discovered, the truest stories are not those which fall from lips, but those which dance eternal in the sacred space between speaking and silence, where all possibilities remain alive. Chapter 20. The Herbalist's Invisible Medicine. In the mist-veiled valleys where ancient forests whispered their secrets, lived an herbalist named Stephen Wright. Unlike other healers who gathered common herbs, Stephen could perceive the luminous threads that connected plants to the ailments of the soul. His medicine hut between grandmother trees contained shelves of seemingly empty clay pots, yet those with awakened senses could detect subtle fragrances that brought tears of remembrance or laughter of forgotten joy. One dawn, as Stephen sorted through dew-kissed leaves, a figure emerged from between the trees, her form shifting like shadows beneath leaves. "I am Sandra Foster," she said, her voice carrying the scent of thousand-year flowers, speaker for the green ones. From her cloak, Sandra drew forth what appeared to be ordinary grass, but as Stephen watched, the blades began to pulse with emerald light, revealing patterns of healing that existed beyond physical form. True medicine, Sandra taught, grows in the spaces between what we see and what we are. She showed Stephen how certain plants could heal grief that had been carried for generations, how others could restore memories of wholeness that existed before words, and how the rarest herbs could only be gathered in moments of perfect presence. "Observe," Sandra whispered, breathing on a simple dandelion. The flower transformed into a constellation of light, each seed containing a different type of silence. Some remedies can only be administered through stillness itself. Stephen discovered that when he ceased naming plants, he could feel their true nature, how mint remembered joy, how sage carried wisdom, and how roses held the pattern of love's first awakening. His healing became not about prescribing, but about creating spaces where people could remember their own wholeness. Your deepest medicine, Sandra revealed, lies not in what you give, but in how you help others receive. For in this world of endless remedies, some healing happens only in the presence of sacred attention. Remember this, seeker. Not all medicine comes in visible forms. The most powerful healing emerges when we learn to hold space for nature's silent wisdom to work through us. Practice this herbalist communion. Sit with any living plant. Close your eyes and feel how it shares its essence when you stop trying to name its purpose. Notice how healing flows naturally when you become still enough to receive. For as Stephen Wright discovered, the truest medicine grows not in any physical garden, but in the sacred space between presence and perception, where silence itself becomes the healing. Part 3. The Practice of Inner Stillness. Chapter 21. The Architect's Blueprint of Silencer. The age when stones still remembered their songs, there lived an architect named Heather Campbell. Unlike other builders who worked only with physical materials, Heather could see the luminous geometries that connected this world to others, drawing buildings that existed simultaneously in multiple realms. Her workshop, perched at the edge of a crystal canyon, contained scrolls that appeared blank to most eyes, but those with a gift could see how her designs shimmered with sacred patterns that folded space itself into dwelling places for both body and soul. One twilight, as Heather traced patterns in the dust, a figure stepped through one of her unbuilt doorways. "I am Elizabeth Gray," she said, her form shifting between angles that shouldn't exist, keeper of the eternal forms. From empty air, Elizabeth drew forth what seemed to be a transparent crystal cube. But as Heather watched, The cube unfolded into impossible shapes, revealing architecture that existed beyond the limits of ordinary space. True building, Elizabeth taught, happens first in the realm of pure possibility. She showed Heather how certain angles could create sanctuaries in the spaces between thoughts, how specific curves could shape chambers that held memories of the future, and how the most sacred structures were those that existed primarily in consciousness itself. "Watch," Elizabeth whispered, touching a nearby wall. The stone became translucent, revealing layers of reality nested within each other like dreams within dreams. Some dwellings can only be entered through the doorway of silent awareness. Heather learned to read the invisible blueprints of creation, to feel how sacred geometry flowed through all things, and to design spaces that served as bridges between the seen and unseen worlds. Her greatest works were those that appeared simplest to ordinary eyes while containing entire universes within their subtle dimensions. "Your true craft," Elizabeth revealed, "lies not in what you build with stone, but in how you shape the architecture of consciousness itself. For in this world of endless forms, some structures can only be realized through the mathematics of silence. Remember this, seeker, not all buildings rise from earthly foundations. The most profound architectures are those that emerge when we learn to construct with awareness itself. Practice this builder's visualization. Close your eyes and sense the geometric patterns that underlie all creation. Feel how sacred forms emerge naturally when you allow your consciousness to become the blueprint. Notice how space itself responds to the architecture of your attention. For as Heather Campbell discovered, the truest buildings arise not from physical plans, but from the sacred geometries of consciousness, where silence itself becomes both foundation and spire. Chapter 22. The Astronomer's Dark Stars. In the era when stars still whispered their ancient names, there lived an astronomer named Justin Evans. Unlike other sky watchers who mapped visible constellations, Justin had discovered something extraordinary: celestial bodies that could only be seen when not looking directly at them. His observatory, carved into a mountain peak where Earth met heaven, contained star charts that appeared empty at first glance. Yet in the corners of these maps, mysterious markings hinted at celestial bodies that danced between what was known and what was knowable. One moonless night, as Justin recorded the movement of shadows between stars, a figure emerged from the darkness itself. "I am Kenneth Hayes," he said, his robes rippling with points of light that mirrored the sky. "Keeper of the invisible constellations." From his sleeve, Kenneth drew forth what seemed to be a piece of pure darkness, but as Justin watched, pinpoints of anti-light began to shine within it, revealing stars that existed in the spaces between conventional sight. True celestial wisdom, Kenneth taught, lies not in what can be seen directly, but in what can only be perceived through the art of not looking. He showed Justin how certain stars influence the threads of fate, but vanished when observed with ordinary vision, how others reveal deeper truths only when glimpsed through half-closed eyes, and how the most powerful celestial bodies could only be known through their effect on the spaces around them. "Observe," Kenneth whispered, drawing a veil across the night sky. Where stars had been, new patterns emerged in the darkness between them, constellations of possibility that wrote destiny in invisible ink across the heavens. Some truths can only be read through the lens of surrender. Justin learned to chart the movements of stars that existed beyond physical light, to feel how they pulled on the tides of consciousness itself, and to read prophecies written in the subtle spaces between what was and what could be. His greatest discoveries came not from looking up, but from allowing the sky to reveal itself through peripheral awareness. Your true gift, Kenneth revealed, lies not in mapping what everyone can see, but in teaching others to perceive what hides in plain sight. For in this world of endless light, some stars shine only for those who have learned to see through darkness. Remember this, seeker. Not all celestial bodies announce themselves with light. The most profound influences move through the cosmos like silent currents, visible only to those who have learned to perceive through the art of indirect knowing. Practice this star reader's meditation. Gaze at the night sky, then slowly shift your attention to the spaces between the stars. Notice how new patterns emerge when you stop trying to see them directly. Feel how the darkness itself begins to speak in a language older than light. For as Justin Evans discovered, the truest stars shine not with visible light, but with the profound radiance of that which can only be known through the sacred art of seeing without looking. Chapter 23, The Alchemist's Invisible Gold. In the shadow of sacred mountains where ancient fires still burned, lived an alchemist named Tiffany Hayes. Unlike other practitioners who sought to transmute base metals into gold, she worked in a laboratory where the crucibles appeared empty, yet contained essences more precious than any earthly treasure. Her workshop, carved into living crystal, held shelves of transparent vessels that seemed to contain nothing. But those with refined perception could sense how each vessel hummed with different frequencies of silence, each more valuable than the last. One midnight, as Tiffany heated what appeared to be ordinary air, a figure materialized from the steam of her crucible. "I am Raymond Brooks," he said, his form rippling like heat waves above molten metal, master of the formless forge. From his hands, Raymond poured what looked like empty space into Tiffany's crucible. But as she watched, the void began to shimmer with possibilities that existed between matter and meaning. True alchemy, Raymond taught, transforms not lead into gold, but noise into sacred silence. He showed her how certain forms of silence could transmute grief into wisdom, how others could distill chaos into clarity, and how the rarest varieties could crystallize time itself into moments of pure potential. The philosopher's stone, he revealed, is not a substance, but a quality of attention. "Watch," Raymond whispered, touching an ordinary stone. Instead of turning to gold, the stone became increasingly transparent, until it held the same profound emptiness as deep space. Some treasures can only be created by removing everything that is not essential. Tiffany discovered that when she ceased trying to create value, she could perceive the inherent worth in all things. How emptiness carried fullness, how stillness held power, and how silence contained all possible sounds. Her greatest works were not the transformation of metals, but the distillation of presence itself. Your true opus, Raymond revealed, lies not in making common things precious, but in revealing the priceless nature of what appears common. For in this world of endless seeking, some riches can only be found through the alchemy of surrender. Remember this, seeker. Not all gold shines with yellow light. The most valuable treasures are those that emerge when we learn to value the sacred space within all things. Practice this alchemist distillation. Sit in perfect stillness and feel how silence begins to transform into something more precious than gold. Notice how true wealth accumulates naturally when you stop trying to create it. For as Tiffany Hayes discovered, the truest transmutation happens not in any physical crucible, but in the sacred laboratory of consciousness, where silence itself becomes the philosopher's stone. Chapter 24, The Mirror Maker's Reflection. In the age when metals still remembered their liquid origins, there lived a mirror maker named Jeremy Torres. Unlike other craftsmen who merely polished metal to reflection, Jeremy knew the secret of creating surfaces that showed not just faces, but the very essence of those who gazed upon them. His workshop lay hidden in a valley where mist never fully cleared, filled with mirrors that seemed to capture fragments of fog within their depths. Most who stumbled upon his door saw only clouded glass, but those ready for truth found surfaces that reflected parts of themselves they had never dared to see. One dawn, as Jeremy poured molten silver into his sacred molds, a figure emerged from the steam rising off his cooling mirrors. "I am Patrick Henderson," he said, his form shifting and multiplying in every reflective surface. "Keeper of the truthful glass." From within his robes, Patrick produced what appeared to be a shard of darkness. But as Jeremy watched, the fragment began to reflect not light, but pure understanding. "True mirrors," Patrick taught, "show not what we project, but what we protect." He guided Jeremy through the subtle art of crafting surfaces that could reflect the unspoken story behind every smile, the hidden hope within every fear, and the ancient wisdom sleeping in every soul. Some mirrors showed possible futures, others revealed forgotten pasts, but the most powerful simply reflected the present moment in its raw, unvarnished truth. "Observe," Patrick whispered, touching one of Jeremy's mirrors. The surface rippled like water, and suddenly Jeremy saw not his face but his essence. Every choice, every dream, every unspoken truth floating in the depths. The clearest reflection comes when we stop trying to see what we expect. Jeremy learned that true mirror craft wasn't about creating perfect surfaces, but about crafting spaces where truth could emerge naturally. His finest works were those that seemed slightly clouded at first glance, yet revealed deeper clarity the longer one gazed. "Your true art," Patrick revealed, "lies not in showing people their faces, but in creating spaces where souls can recognize themselves. For in this world of endless appearances, some truths can only be seen when we stop trying to look. Remember this, seeker, not all reflections show what stands before them. The most profound mirrors are those that reveal what lies beneath the surface of our carefully constructed selves. Practice this mirror gazer's meditation. Sit before a mirror in dim light, allowing your eyes to soften until you no longer focus on your physical reflection. Notice how a deeper image begins to emerge when you cease expecting what you should see. For as Jeremy Torres discovered, the truest mirrors reflect not our masks but our mysteries, revealing the sacred silence that lives behind every face we show the world. Chapter 25, The Dream Walker's Waking Sleep. In the twilight realm, between mountain and mist, where reality wore thin like morning fog, lived a dream walker named Brittany Morgan. Unlike ordinary healers who tended physical wounds, Brittany walked the delicate bridge between sleep and waking where trauma nested in the souls of those who suffered. Her sanctuary existed in a cave whose walls shifted between solid stone and ethereal vapor. Those who sought her help would find themselves drifting in a space where consciousness flowed like water, neither fully asleep nor truly awake. One evening, as Brittany guided a troubled child through nightmares, a figure emerged from the cave's shadows. "I am Helen Rivera," she said, her form wavering between solid and translucent. "Guardian of the liminal realms." From her hands, Helen released what appeared to be dream smoke that coalesced into floating symbols. "True healing," she taught, "happens not in sleep or waking, but in the sacred space between, where reality is still fluid enough to reshape." She showed Brittany how certain traumas hide in the folds between thoughts, how fears nest in the shadows between breaths, and how some wounds can only be reached through the doorway of half-sleep. The deepest healing, Helen revealed, occurs when we learn to dance between states of being. "Watch," Helen whispered, touching a sleeping visitor's temple. The air around them became thick with unspoken stories, each one a thread that could be gently unwoven and rewoven into healing patterns. Some pain can only be transformed when consciousness becomes as gentle as morning mist. Brittany mastered the art of walking through others' dreams like a gentle breeze, disturbing nothing yet transforming everything. She learned to read the language of half-formed thoughts, to hear the whispers of healing that existed between words, and to guide souls through their own shadows without leaving footprints. "Your true gift," Helen revealed, "lies not in changing dreams, but in helping others navigate the spaces where dreams and reality dance together. For in this world of rigid boundaries, some healing can only happen in the places where all things are possible. Remember this, seeker, not all medicine comes in solid form. The most profound healing occurs in the delicate space between what was and what could be." Practice this Dreamwalker's meditation. Lie in the space between sleep and waking when consciousness becomes fluid. Notice how thoughts and sensations flow like water, neither solid nor empty. Feel how healing emerges naturally in this liminal space. For as Brittany Morgan discovered, the truest transformation happens not in dreams alone, but in the sacred threshold where all states of being merge into one healing dance. Chapter 26, The Timekeeper's Eternal Moment. In an ancient temple carved from living crystal, where sundials cast shadows that moved in mysterious patterns, lived a timekeeper named Aaron Collins. Unlike ordinary clock watchers who merely counted hours, Aaron tended to the very fabric of time itself, maintaining the delicate rhythms between moments where eternity dwelled. His chamber sat atop the highest spire, filled with hourglasses that sometimes flowed sideways and water clocks that occasionally ran backward. Those who climbed the 1,000 steps to seek his wisdom often found themselves arriving before they had begun their journey. One timeless afternoon, as Aaron adjusted the flow of a particularly stubborn moment, a figure stepped out of a shadow that hadn't existed moments before. "I am Elizabeth Campbell," she said, her age shifting between young and old with each blink. "Mistress of the eternal now." From her robe, Elizabeth produced what appeared to be frozen light. But as Aaron watched, the ray began to pulse with the heartbeat of time itself. True timekeeping, she taught, is not about measuring moments, but about discovering the infinity that exists between them. She showed him how certain silences could stretch seconds into eons, how others could compress centuries into heartbeats, and how the rarest forms of stillness could allow one to step outside time entirely. The greatest mystery, Elizabeth revealed, is that eternity isn't endless time, but the complete absence of it. "Observe," Elizabeth whispered, touching an hourglass. Instead of sand flowing downward, the grains began dancing in patterns that told stories of all possible futures and pasts simultaneously. Some moments contain all moments if you know how to hold them properly. Aaron learned that authentic timekeeping wasn't about tracking duration, but about cultivating the awareness that could perceive the infinite depth hidden within each instant. His greatest skill became helping others find the doorways to timelessness that existed between their thoughts. Your true purpose, Elizabeth revealed, lies not in measuring time's passage, but in revealing its illusion. For in this world of endless rushing, some truths can only be found when time itself stands still. Remember this, seeker, not all moments pass at the same speed. The deepest wisdom emerges when we learn to rest in the eternal present that exists between the ticks of the cosmic clock. Practice this timekeeper's meditation. Sit in perfect stillness and feel how each breath contains an eternity. Notice how time begins to bend and flow differently when you cease trying to measure it. For as Aaron Collins discovered, the truest mastery of time comes not from counting its passage, but from finding the sacred silence where all moments merge into one endless now. Chapter 27, The Bridge Builder's Invisible Span. In the misty valleys where mountain peaks pierce the clouds, there lived a bridge builder named Samantha Reed. Unlike other engineers who worked only with stone and timber, Samantha possessed the rare ability to construct bridges between realms, spans that existed through intention rather than material. Her workshop was a curious sight, empty archways that seemed to lead nowhere, yet pilgrims who stepped through them with pure hearts would find themselves in places that existed between the known and unknown. Most saw only air, but those with vision witnessed shimmering pathways of pure possibility. While meditating at one of her invisible crossings, a figure emerged from what appeared to be a doorway in the air itself. "I am Catherine Bell," she said, her form rippling like heat waves above summer stones, "weaver of the ways between." From her hands, Catherine released what looked like threads of starlight. But as Samantha watched, the strands began weaving themselves into bridges that existed only in the corners of vision. True bridges, Catherine taught, connect not places but possibilities. She guided Samantha through the subtle art of building spans that could only be crossed by those who believed in their existence. Some bridges connected distant memories to present moments. Others joined lost dreams to future realities, but the most powerful simply created space for unlikely connections to form naturally. "Watch," Catherine whispered, touching an empty arch. The air between its posts began to shimmer with potential, revealing countless paths that existed simultaneously. The strongest connections are those we create without forcing them into being. Samantha learned that authentic bridge building wasn't about constructing physical passages, but about holding space for connections to emerge organically. Her finest works were those that seemed to vanish when viewed directly, yet became solid beneath the feet of those who trusted their journey. "Your true craft," Catherine revealed, "lies not in building paths, but in revealing the connections that already exist between all things. For in this world of apparent separation, Some bridges can only be crossed through faith in their presence. Remember this, seeker. Not all passages can be seen with mortal eyes. The most profound connections form in the space between what we think is possible and what truly is. Practice this bridgewalker's meditation. Stand in a doorway and feel the threshold beneath your feet. Imagine countless invisible bridges extending from where you are to where you might be. Notice how reality shifts when you trust in connections you cannot see. For as Samantha Reed discovered, the truest bridges span not physical distances, but the sacred space between doubt and certainty, where all journeys become possible through the power of pure intention. Chapter 28, The Fire Tender's Cold Flame. In a temple carved from volcanic glass, where shadows danced like living things, dwelled a fire tender named Brandon Walsh. Unlike common hearthkeepers who tended ordinary flames, Brandon was guardian of the eternal fires, sacred flames that burned without heat or consumption. His sanctuary lay deep within obsidian chambers, where countless flames flickered in impossible colors. Some burned upside down, others froze mid-flicker like crystalline sculptures, and the most mysterious cast no light yet illuminated truth itself. While tending to a particularly enigmatic blue flame that burned cold as winter frost, a figure emerged from the heart of the fire itself. "I am Michelle Hayes," she said, her form composed of living flame that radiated stillness instead of heat, speaker for the flameless fire. From her essence, Michelle drew forth what appeared to be a flame frozen in time, but as Brandon watched, the fire began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of creation itself. True fire tending, she taught, is not about feeding flames, but about nurturing the space where transformation occurs. She showed him how certain fires could transmute thoughts without burning them, how others could illuminate darkness without casting shadows, and how the rarest flames could purify intention without destroying form. The greatest mystery, Michelle revealed, is that the most powerful fires are those that transform through stillness rather than consumption. "Observe," Michelle whispered, touching a flame that burned silver and silent. Instead of crackling and roaring, it began singing a soundless song that reshaped reality around it. Some fires exist not to destroy or illuminate, but to create space where impossible things become possible. Brandon mastered the art of tending flames that burned in the realm of pure potential. His greatest gift became helping others discover their inner cold fire, the transformative force that changes everything while consuming nothing. "Your true purpose," Michelle revealed, lies not in keeping flames alive, but in showing others how to burn without being burned. For in this world of consuming fires, some transformations can only happen through the flame that does not destroy. Remember this, seeker, not all fires bring destruction. The deepest transformation comes from the flame that burns within the soul's silent spaces. Practice this fire tender's meditation. Sit before a candle and imagine its flame turning cold and still. Feel how transformation can occur through presence rather than consumption. Let your inner fire burn without burning. For as Brandon Walsh discovered, the truest flames are not those that consume the darkness, but those that transform it into light through the sacred art of flameless burning. Chapter 29, The Memory Keeper's Forgotten Wisdom. In a library built from living crystal that hummed with forgotten songs, there dwelled a memory keeper named Christina Murphy. Unlike ordinary archivists who preserve scrolls and tablets, Christina safeguarded memories that existed outside of time itself. fragments of wisdom too precious to be written down. Her sanctuary contained no books or parchments, only shimmering pools of liquid memory and crystalline chambers that held echoes of ancient knowing. Those who sought her wisdom often left remembering less than when they arrived, yet somehow understanding more. While tending to a particularly delicate memory pool that held the dreams of extinct butterflies, a figure emerged from the rippling surface. "I am Sandra Hayes," she said, her features shifting like reflections in disturbed water. "Guardian of the unremembered." From her essence, Sandra drew forth what appeared to be a drop of pure remembrance, but as Christina watched, the droplet began to sing with the voices of 1,000 forgotten tales. True memory-keeping, she taught, is not about holding tight to knowledge, but learning how to let it go so it may preserve itself. She revealed how certain memories grew stronger through deliberate forgetting, how others could only be preserved by releasing them to the cosmic mind, and how the most sacred wisdom survived precisely because no one tried to remember it. The greatest mystery, Sandra shared, is that some truths can only be known by unknowing them. "Watch," Sandra whispered, touching a crystal that held the last sunset of a vanished world. Instead of showing images, it began weaving patterns of anti-memory, spaces where knowledge dwelled in the absence of remembering. Some wisdom survives only in the gaps between what we think we know. Christina learned that authentic memory-keeping wasn't about storing information, but about creating sacred spaces where knowledge could exist in its natural state, free from the constraints of human recall. Her greatest gift became helping others forget in ways that paradoxically preserved truth forever. Your true calling, Sandra revealed, lies not in remembering the past, but in protecting the eternal present, where all memory truly lives. For in this world of endless recording, some wisdom can only survive by remaining officially forgotten. Remember this, seeker, not all knowledge must be held. The deepest wisdom lives in the spaces between memory and forgetting. Practice this memory keeper's meditation. Sit in stillness and choose one precious memory. Instead of clutching it tight, release it completely. Notice how it returns transformed, carrying deeper truth in its surrender. For as Christina Murphy discovered, the truest preservation comes not from desperate remembering, but from the sacred art of letting wisdom remember itself through you. Chapter 30. The Gatekeeper's Open Door. In the spaces between reality's edges, where possibility shimmered like heat waves in desert air, lived a gatekeeper named Mark Thompson. Unlike common doorkeepers who guarded physical entrances, Mark tended thresholds between dimensions, points where the fabric of existence grew thin enough to part. His sanctuary existed everywhere and nowhere, a nexus of doorways that appeared as ordinary arches to most, but revealed themselves as cosmic portals to those who approached without agenda or expectation. Some led to realms of pure light, others to chambers of infinite shadow, but the most mysterious simply opened into deeper versions of the present moment. While contemplating a particularly enigmatic threshold that seemed to lead both everywhere and nowhere at once, a figure stepped sideways through what appeared to be solid stone. "I am Ruth Anderson," she said, her form simultaneously there and not there, walker between worlds. From her essence, Ruth manifested what looked like a key made of starlight, but as Mark watched, the key transformed into 1,000 different shapes before dissolving completely. True gatekeeping, she taught, is not about deciding who may pass, but about recognizing those who are ready to cross their own thresholds. She showed him how certain doors opened only for those who had no destination in mind, how others appeared exclusively to souls who had released all expectations, and how the most sacred portals manifested solely for those who had forgotten they were seeking. The greatest paradox, Ruth revealed, is that the most important doors open only for those who have stopped trying to open them. "Observe," Ruth whispered, touching an ancient archway that seemed carved from morning mist. Instead of swinging open, the space within the arch began dancing with infinite possibilities, each one accessible only to those who had surrendered their need to choose. Some passages appear only when we stop trying to force our way through. Mark mastered the art of tending gates that opened into wonder rather than destination. His greatest gift became helping others discover that the doorways they sought had always been within them, waiting only for recognition rather than discovery. "Your true purpose," Ruth revealed, "lies not in guarding passages, but in showing others how every moment is a threshold to the extraordinary. For in this world of locked doors and rigid boundaries, some openings can only be found by those who have released the need to find them. Remember this, seeker, not all doors must be sought. The deepest passages open naturally to those who have learned to stand in perfect readiness without reaching. Practice this gatekeeper's meditation. Stand in simple awareness and feel how every breath is a doorway. Notice how reality shifts when you release your grip on where you think you need to go. Let every moment become a threshold into wonder. For as Mark Thompson discovered, the truest portals are not those we strive to enter, but those that open naturally when we finally learn to stand in the perfect presence of our own being. If you enjoyed this audiobook, I created a free ebook version for you. You can download it using the link in the pinned comment. Conclusion. In the highest chamber of the mountain temple where reality's veil grew gossamer thin, the ancient keeper Christopher Martinez sat in contemplation. Unlike ordinary temple guardians who protected relics and scrolls, Christopher was custodian of something far more precious, the spaces between spoken truths where the deepest wisdom dwells. His sanctuary existed in perpetual twilight, where whispers echoed longer than shouts and silence itself became a living teacher. The walls seemed to breathe with the accumulated wisdom of ages, each stone holding secrets too profound for casual revelation. As the final rays of sunset painted the chamber in ethereal gold, Christopher lifted a crystal vessel that appeared empty, yet felt heavy with invisible treasure. "The greatest mysteries," he spoke softly, "are not those we guard with locks and walls, but those we protect through sacred silence." He poured the seeming emptiness into a pool of moonlight. Where the invisible contents fell, reality rippled like disturbed water. "True wisdom," he continued, "does not announce itself with trumpets and proclamation. It whispers itself into existence through those who have learned to listen with their entire being." From the rippling air stepped three figures: a merchant who had lost everything by speaking too soon, a healer who had saved lives through strategic silence, and a scribe whose unwritten words had preserved ancient truth. Each bore witness to wisdom's paradox. That power grows through protection rather than proclamation. The final secret Christopher revealed is that you have always been the guardian. Every choice to keep silence when others would speak, every moment of witnessing without judgment, every breath of conscious presence so wed, these are the acts that preserve wisdom's flame. He showed how certain truths grow stronger through selective sharing, how others flourish only in the soil of silence, and how the most precious revelations survive precisely because they remain unspoken. For in this age of endless noise, he taught, sacred silence becomes the highest form of preservation. Remember this, keeper of mysteries, you are not just a reader of ancient wisdom, but a living vessel of its continuation. Your conscious silence creates the space where truth can flourish untainted. Practice this guardian's meditation. Sit in perfect stillness and feel the weight of all you know, but need not speak. Notice how wisdom deepens when held in sacred trust rather than casual conversation. Let your presence become the sanctuary where truth can safely dwell. For as Christopher Martinez revealed, the deepest mysteries are not those we strive to uncover, but those we learn to protect through the sacred art of knowing when to whisper and when to keep silent. In your wisdom-keeping lies the preservation of eternal truth. And so the Whispering Codex ends as it began, not with a thunderous proclamation, but with a sacred silence that speaks louder than words ever could. If you enjoyed this exclusive audiobook, I handpicked this next book which will change your life.